Hello, children. This is your English teacher, Mrs. Aisha. We have a heart touching story written by Oscar Wilde, The Happy Prince. Let's get into the narration of the story. Oscar Wilde was an Irish playwright, poet, and short story writer. He is most famous for his witty plays, which often take a very critical but also comic view of late 19th century upper class English society. The characters in the story are the Happy Prince, Swallow the bird, seamstress and her son, young man, little match girl, town councillors, the mayor. The story of the Happy Prince dwells upon the themes like social injustice, empathy, kindness, and charity. In this story, we come across a statue who at one time was a real prince. When the prince was alive, he was a happy person. He lived in the palace and did not know about human suffering. His life was full of joys. Upon his death, his statue was built at the top of a tall column in the city. The statue was covered all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. The prince was able to witness all the sorrows and sufferings which the common people faced in their daily life. This made the prince very sad, and large drops of tears began to run down his golden cheeks. A little swallow, who had alighted between the feet of the happy prince to spend the night there, became curious to know where did the drops of water fall from. He looked up and saw the eyes of the happy prince full of tears. The bird took pity on the prince and assisted him in his desire to ease the sufferings of the common people. He started with plucking the ruby from the prince's sword and giving it to the seamstress, who had no money to feed her ailing child. Then he plucked a sapphire from one of the eyes of the statue and gave it to the playwright, who was too poor to make fire in the winter to continue his writing. He was also very hungry and feeling weak. Seamstress means a woman who sews, especially one who earns her living by sewing. One day, the prince gave away the other eye to a little match girl whose matches had fallen in the gutter. Her father would have beaten her if she went home without money. The prince's heart filled with pity for the girl. He immediately commanded the swallow to pluck out his other eye and help the girl. But the swallow was not ready to do so because this would make the prince completely blind. On being insisted, he plucked out the prince's other eye, dived past the match girl, and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. The little bird decided not to leave the company of the happy prince, who had gone blind now. Although the prince was not able to see the sorrows or sufferings any more, he knew it was there. So he instructed the bird to take off the fine gold he was covered with and give it to the poor. The bird followed his words and picked off leaf after leaf of the gold, till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. Then the snow came, and the poor little swallow grew older and colder, but he did not leave the prince. Eventually, he grew weak and died from exposure and exhaustion. Just at that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue as if something had broken. It was, in fact, the leaden heart that had snapped right in two at the loss of the sweet and kind swallow. The statue was no more beautiful and useful. It stood deserted. So the town councillors and the mayor pulled it down. Then they melted the statue in a furnace, but the broken heart did not melt. So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was lying. When God asked one of his angels to bring the two most precious things in the city, the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. God welcomed the two in his garden of paradise and deemed them beautiful creations. With this, I would like to conclude with a beautiful thought. The only way you can serve God is by serving others. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the story.